Good afternoon, and once again, welcome to the masterclass here for July. I'm John Little, the founder and CEO of the Winner's Edge Coaching. And so for today, we're going to be continuing our series about building confidence and gaining executive presence for leaders. Today's topic is talking about building that unshakable leadership confidence. So building the skills, the knowledge, the ability to really step into yourself as a leader, step into your place where you really are the one who is again owning that room, and it's really feeling for yourself, feeling in a way that you're confident, that you have that sense of, I can do this, I'm going to be able to be successful, and not run into those areas where you may be limited by some of those self-limiting beliefs. So let's go ahead and dive into it, and let's kind of go through what we're going to talk about today. So part of it is identifying what those limiting beliefs are, how they exist, how they're created, why they pop up, and when they pop up, what can you do about them? We're going to talk about mastering that reframe process. So in yesterday's masterclass, I talked about that process of claiming it, naming it, and reframing it, right? So that's part of that dealing with imposter syndrome. That's part of dealing with some of the challenges that you may have. So I'm going to give you a four-step framework on how to transform some of those limiting beliefs into things that will actually be empowering for you. Then how do you create that lasting change? So it's not just in the moment. So how do you stack and continue to build that confidence? So you as a leader feel that you can step into those rooms, step into those executive spaces that you haven't been in before. And then how do you then transcend that beyond yourself? So how do you build a positive culture from that, and a belief positive culture? So where not only do you have confidence, but you're also doubling down on the confidence of others. So one of the things you'll walk away with today is really a plan for you to be able to implement these things in your life, in your career, in the path that you're on. So that way, this is something that you can continue to lean on, something that you can continue to grow in. And again, areas for you to, as a leader, step into your true potential. So let's start by talking about what's the challenges of hidden beliefs. What are the things that happen when you don't have that strong belief in yourself? And so I have an example here of Alex, and this is obviously not Alex, but a rendering of somebody who I worked with. She had experience working with high performance teams. She had good results, but she kept on getting passed over for opportunities. So opportunities would come to grow, opportunities would come for promotions, but she continually got passed over. Why was that? Because she was not exuding the leadership behaviors and leadership confidence that the executives were looking for. And so what did it do? It did these things over here on the right? It stalled promotions and opportunities for her to grow. Even though her numbers were solid, even though her production was solid, there were just some things that were missing from her. And so those type of things cost her opportunities. So sometimes she would find situations where she would be hesitant. She'd be doubting herself. She'd be questioning her decisions, and doing that kind of publicly, and not having kind of strong, confident language, strong, confident spirit, not really stepping into her own. And so some of those things became challenges and issues, and it cost her, again, opportunities, because they didn't see that initial move to action. They saw that hesitance. They had some team members that were part of her team that, again, I talked about this yesterday. When you aren't displaying leadership, or you're not displaying confidence as a leader, you're not displaying the fact that you'll speak up, that you'll step up, that you'll ask and answer the tough questions, then your team is not going to do that as well. And so when executives see that, when they're thinking about, okay, who do we want to move forward to the next level of their career, the next level of the organization, more often than not, they're going to want to go with somebody who has had that experience of not only stepping up themselves, but they've been able to demonstrate and show where people on their teams have stepped up as well. The personal toll of those hidden beliefs can really be overwhelming for some people, and really detrimental. That burnout that you can feel, that exhaustion, that frustration of, I feel like I'm doing everything that I can, and yet I'm not going anywhere. Those are things that can continue to weigh you down as well. And then the feeling that you're not living up to your potential, right? You'll start to question, is this my ceiling? Can I go any further here at this company? Can I go any farther in my career? And when those doubts start to creep in, then it just kind of takes you back up to the top, where you start to look at opportunities that you've missed. You start to look at maybe being a little bit more hesitant, because you're like, I don't want to mess up what I had. If I'm not growing, then maybe they're not seeing something, maybe they're not seeing enough. So let me not give them another reason to doubt me. Let me not give them another reason to question me. And so as a result, sometimes we aren't as aggressive as we should be. And then you have no idea that what's really going on in the back of your mind, that imposter syndrome that you're struggling with, you really have no idea that that's what's ultimately holding you back from the opportunities that you're really seeking. So what are those beliefs? When we talk about these limiting beliefs, what are they? Really, it's those thought processes, those thought patterns in the back of your mind, that voice in the back of your head that you hear sometimes that causes you to question whether or not you can do something, whether or not you should be in specific rooms, whether or not you should be in certain situations, whether or not people want to hear you, or whether or not you have the experience or the knowledge or the position to lead. Like those are those unconscious thought patterns that will continue to crop up in your mind. And they may come from experiences that you've had in the past. They could come from a number of different areas societally, where maybe, you've been taught, or you've been told, or you've been, led to understand, or you haven't seen the modeling from someone who looks like you or who shares common characteristics. It could be things that happened in the past where maybe you have tried and it didn't go the way that you wanted to. And so now those beliefs are that I can't, rather than that was a learning experience. What can I learn from that? How can I leverage that learning so that way I can grow? And why those are dangerous, why those beliefs are dangerous and challenging, is because it starts to create that loop where the more that we focus on those beliefs, the more we buy into those beliefs, the less we are able to move forward, the less that we're able to see these opportunities, the less that we're able to expand the opportunities to our teams through opportunities that we find ourselves. So those limiting beliefs are not just limiting individually, but they become limiting collectively as well. They become limiting to the team, and they become limiting to the organization if they're not dealt with. And this is why these limiting beliefs aren't only detrimental to the individual, but limiting beliefs that exist within your leadership team are also detrimental to the company, because as an organization, as an HR professional, as an HR leader, you always want to be looking at your leadership pipeline and who's coming up next and who has the ability to step up into the next role. And if limiting beliefs are existing at a high level throughout the different layers of your organization, you may look at your team, you may look at the company, you may look at some of your managers and say, wow, I don't really see that there's anybody here who has the opportunity to step up and be that next level leader. When in reality, the people may be there, but maybe the self-limiting beliefs that are holding them back, holding back their behaviors, holding back their actions, holding back their motivation, holding them back from taking the necessary steps to display and show to you that they're potentially the right person to grow. So what are some of the big three, right? The big three limiting beliefs that leaders struggle with. One of them is, I'm not expert enough to speak up. So maybe they don't feel like they have the experience. Maybe they don't feel like that they've been in the shoes long enough. Maybe they don't feel like that they've been in the position where they've done it before, when they don't have that, what we see on the screen, that 100% certainty that really never just comes through thought. That 100% certainty only comes through action and proof. So the reality again is that if you are in the room, if you've been invited in the room, if you earned your space into the room, or it doesn't have to be the physical room, but if you're in the right conversations, then you do have the space to speak up. And the only way that you'll know that if you do have the expertise, the only way that you know if your ideas are going to land or if they're going to fall flat, is to actually put them out there, is to actually talk them through with someone, is to ask questions about it. That's the way that we are going to be able to figure out, are you an expert enough to speak up? Because the reality is, none of us are really ever the experts to speak up on things until we actually do it. And once we speak up, and once we get feedback, and once we tweak, and once we adjust, and once we kind of try and learn, and that's how we become an expert at something. We just aren't an expert because we read a book or because we had, one singular experience. Our expertise comes through a number of experiences and a number of ways to test that, tweak it, and then iterate from there. If I make a mistake, I'll lose all credibility. That's the second leadership limiting belief. And I'll tell you that cannot be further from the truth in most cases, right? There's no such thing as universals, but in most cases, especially in leadership roles, especially in roles where you are being looked at as a leader, potentially looked at with someone who has the opportunity to grow into more of an executive role, If you make a singular mistake, you'll lose all credibility. The reality is that that's how we learn. We learn through mistakes. We learn through things that we were challenged by. We learn through the way that we try something and then it may partially work. So how do we build on the success that worked? What do we learn from the areas that didn't go well? And then what do we do from there, right? So that mindset, that thought process, if I make a mistake, I'll lose all credibility. That kind of comes from a couple of places. One is like a fixed mindset that there's really no opportunity to grow. There's no opportunity to do things differently. And I say this phrase, and I don't want it to be construed in any negative way, but it also comes from kind of like a poverty mindset. A poverty mindset is that if I try something and I lose what little bit I have, I'll never be able to get it back again. Versus an abundance mindset, which is I'm going to use all the resources that I have because there's something in here that's going to allow me to build and grow to somewhere greater, right? It's just a difference in the mindset and the way that you think about things. So not thinking about it from the standpoint of if I make a mistake, I'll lose all credibility, but shifting that to if I make a mistake, then I have something to learn. I have something to learn from. I have evidence, I have information that I can learn from, that I can build upon. And then I need to do it all myself to ensure quality. That is one of the hallmarks of imposter syndrome, is if someone says that I need to have control over every element so I can ensure quality, so I can ensure the outcome, so I can ensure that I know the process. That is a self-limiting belief, especially from a leader, because as a leader, one of the things that is one of your most important jobs is to develop other leaders, right? Leaders should always be looking to get people who are on their team who want to grow promoted off of their team, because that's the way that you grow a league of leaders, or you build out your tree and build out your legacy. Those are the things that really are going to help you as an individual leader build a stronger organization. But if you're doing everything yourself, you're not ever giving anybody the opportunities to be able to learn, to be able to grow, to be able to do things that they're going to learn from experience, and kind of taking you back to the first part of this slide, right? It can take you back to where people on your team are feeling like, I'm not an expert enough to speak up. Why? Because you've been doing everything for the team. So they've never had those opportunities. They may feel if they make a mistake, they'll lose all credibility, because if they see that you are so involved in every single thing, then they're going to try to model exactly what you've done. And if they don't do it the same exact way that you did, then they're afraid that they may lose credibility in your eyes. So this becomes a vicious circle of things that will happen and can really, really undercut a leader's ability to grow themselves, but also to grow their team. So now, what are your triggers? So think about when you are feeling that, when you're feeling that leadership struggle, when you're feeling those challenges, what are the things that are causing those situations? Is it a situation that triggers you in that moment? Is it a situation that maybe you feel uncomfortable in, a situation where you don't necessarily feel you're strongest, a situation that you don't necessarily feel confident? And is that situation what causes those questions, those doubts? And you'll know that if you're in that situation over and over again and you have those feelings. Is it a limiting thought that continues to pop up? For example, you see a couple that are on the screen here. Do they think that if I look unprepared, that they're going to judge me for the work that I did, the preparation I did? If I make a mistake, or if I think that I'm incompetent, I don't really belong at this table. Like, those are the things, those are those limiting thoughts that when you have those thoughts, if you don't capture those, again, if you don't name it, tame it, and reframe it as imposter syndrome, those limiting thoughts will be the things that will stop you from speaking, that will stop you from acting, that will stop you from delegating, that will stop you from doing the things that you need to do in order to demonstrate your leadership behaviors. You may actually start to feel the physical manifestations of some of these triggers, that anxiety. You may feel tightness in your gut. You may feel that your temperature, your body temperature rises. You may feel shortness of breath. You may feel a little bit lightheaded, right? There's a number of things you may feel your heart rate increase. There's a number of physical manifestations that you may recognize. And then the behaviors that you may get into. So you may be stuck in silence. You may always couch things with a way to kind of diminish the authority that's behind it. And you may use qualifying statements like, I don't know if I'm right about this, or I've just had a thought that I wanted to share, but, and even using that word, but, I heard something years ago that but is an acronym for before unfiltered truth. So whenever you use but in a sentence, then you're negating everything that was said before it, and you're diminishing everything that you say after it. So just being mindful of how you're using the language, not shutting down, not speaking. If you speak once and you don't get the response that you're looking for, just shutting down and then not engaging any further. Those are some of those some of those leadership triggers that you'll recognize, and those leadership triggers are the behaviors that you'll be able to actually feel and think. Those are some of the triggers you want to be aware of. And when you have those triggers, that's the moment to pause, take a step back, and just remind yourself, I've got this. I'm here for a reason. I'm in this room for a reason. I have this platform for a reason. I have this opportunity for a reason. And with that, use that as your fuel to move forward. So let's talk about Rachel. So Rachel's, again, one of the clients that I worked with. And this was an example of tangibly taking those beliefs and then being mindful about how do you in the moment move forward. So before Rachel had this epiphany, once it kind of became clear for her, here's really where she struggled, right? She would go to meetings and wouldn't say anything. She would just kind of sit there and take notes, nod her head. If she was called upon, she would say, nothing really to add here, or I don't have any questions, even when there are questions that existed, right? And then from there, she would also go into situations where she would just kind of, over preparation, where she would just overthink, overthink. And by the time it actually got to the meeting, she just felt completely overwhelmed a lot of times. And then the feedback that she got a lot of times because of the observed behavior was that she needed to be more strategic. She needed to be more a visionary. She needed to be more vocal in those meetings. So what she did was she really said, I'm going to take some tangible steps. I'm going to do some tangible things so that way I can be in a position where I feel much more confident. So she said she challenged herself to speaking up at least 3 times in a meeting. And whether it was an original thought, whether it was something that she was sharing from her team, whether it was just a response to a conversation that was happening, she set that benchmark. She set that benchmark that I'm not going to leave this meeting without speaking at least 3 times. And what she saw was the more that she spoke, the more comfortable she got. The more comfortable she got, the more she was able to speak about things that were actually areas where she had unique perspectives that were valuable to the organization. Why she was invited in the room in the first place, because they had seen what the work that she had done. They had seen her potential, and they recognized that this is an opportunity for Rachel to break through, for Rachel to, really contribute. But she had to put herself in that position. She reduced the amount of time that she was preparing, right? She got into that analysis paralysis, and she was like, I recognize that I have so many things in my head. I have so many things that I'm thinking about that when it comes to being able to pull a nugget, I can't just find it because I've got so many things that are going on. And she was just overwhelming herself. So she's like, let me just focus on the big pictures. Let me focus on the categories. Let me focus on some grander areas rather than the granular details. And by making that shift, that allowed her to feel more comfortable being in the meetings and having a clear mind, being able to listen and be present. And really the feedback that she ended up getting was, we're seeing the growth that we were looking for. This is the Rachel that we've been waiting on. This is the person who we promoted. And so now she feels so much more confident. She recognizes the value that she can bring. She's looking now for opportunities for her to not only shine, but also for her to bring in people from her team at the appropriate moments so they can also shine, right? Because now she has the confidence of saying, yeah, this is somebody who's on my team. This is somebody that I believe in. This is someone who I think has something to contribute. And she suspects that the people in the room are going to appreciate that. See, the people in the room are going to be ready for it, and they're going to be accepting of that. So here's part of the models that I talked about, right? So I talked about it previously, name it, frame it, and name it, frame it, reclaim it, and this, or name it, tame it, and reframe it. This is another model that is very similar to that, but it's something that you can, again, kind of do in the moment, is when you are in those moments and you recognize, okay, hey, this is a self-limiting belief. This is a self-limiting thought. This is something that has jumped up that's kind of, overwhelming me a little bit, or I'm starting to feel the physical manifestations of it. Notice it in the moment and recognize it for what it is. And then asking yourself the simple questions like, all right, are the stories that I'm telling myself, are they true based on evidence that I have? Are they true based on information that I have? Is it true based on feedback that I've gotten? Or are these questions that are existing in my mind right now? Are these questions things that maybe I'm just trying to struggle with? And when you are thinking about, right, think about it from an external voice as well. Like, is this something that somebody has said to me? Or is this something that I'm just thinking right now in my head? And then reframing it. And this is part of that process of using those doubts. Once you start to recognize the doubts for what they are, once you start to kind of categorize it as, okay, this is a doubt that's based in imposter syndrome. And so therefore, what I want to do is use this now as fuel, use this now as an opportunity to either prove or disprove this thought in my head, and recognize, taking you back a couple of slides, that one mistake or one comment doesn't mean that it's going to erode all credibility that you may have, but really it's going to allow you to get some real world feedback on, is this doubt something that is founded in reality, or is this doubt something that's just existing in my head that I need to overcome? And then once you start to do that, once you go through that process, once you've gone through that a few times, then you'll be able to reinforce, yes, I'm good. I can move forward. I can speak up. I can raise my hand. I can step into my executive presence. I can feel confident. Yesterday I talked about even physically how you enter the room with your shoulders back, your chin up, your chest out, walking into a room more confidently. Once you start to do that, it starts to reinforce those positive behaviors. And those positive behaviors that you're reinforcing are the ones that are going to help you be able to really identify how you can strongly move forward into that executive presence. So here's something I'm going to challenge you to do going forward. It is really just kind of take these 3 steps. And if you want to write these 3 steps down, the first step is identifying what those self-limiting beliefs may be. The second step is tangibly challenging those beliefs and intentionally challenging those beliefs. And this can be something that even you write down, right? You want to even take out a piece of paper, and as things are popping into your head, write down, this is what I'm thinking. This is what my subconscious is telling me. And then challenge those beliefs. Where is this coming from? Has this been validated by someone else? Is this feedback that I've gotten, or is this just something that's in my head? And then how can you tangibly shift and pivot? So you may even want to do 3 columns on a page, right? The first column is the limiting belief. The second column is, how am I challenging that? And the third column is, how do I now reframe that? I think if you do that a couple of times, when you start to put it on paper, you'll start to realize that these self-limiting beliefs, or these beliefs that I have, once I see them on paper, like, that's not me. That's not a way I would describe myself. That's not the way that my mentors or my people who have championed me would describe me. So where is this belief coming from? And then identifying where that belief is. And then it'll be a lot easier to get to that third column and do some of those action items. Again, taking it back to Rachel, speaking up 3 times in a meeting. That's not that hard to do. It's just a matter of challenging yourself to intentionally do that. Now, once you've done that, again, you want to continue to build that process of success. You want to do that. You want to do what's called a 2-minute confidence log. So I talked a little bit yesterday about a brag book, and a brag book is listing out those accomplishments and listing out the processes that led you to those accomplishments, right? And that brag book is a way for you to go back and look at your successes. Anytime you're in those moments of challenge or doubt, go back and look at those, so that way you have something you can say, oh yeah, I did do this. I have done hard things before, right? And I've done hard things before well. So you can build confidence based off of that. So this confidence log is another way to do that. It's a way for you to look at, okay, here are the things that I was struggling with this week. Here's the areas that I wasn't confident this week or in this situation, or my mind was just, not really confident the way I wanted it to be. And then here's how I actually got a win this week. So you could start to track where you were challenged and also track your wins. And then also, the more that you do this process, the more you start to speak up, the more you start to engage. This is another opportunity for you to get feedback, for you to talk with your peers, your colleagues, your leaders, and say, hey, what have you been noticing? What have you seen with me? I'm being more intentional about how I show up, but I can only know how I show up from how I feel. I would love to get some external feedback on how I show up. So asking colleagues those questions and then kind of logging their responses, it's another way for you to continually feed yourself. And then how does that now cascade to the organization, right? So the organizational impact of those beliefs when they're not checked, like we talked about some of the challenges, because these start individually, but then they can grow exponentially through the organization if you don't have leaders that are mindful about how they're showing up, that are mindful about not letting imposter syndrome stand in their way. So one of the things that we see that innovation tends to be challenged, tends to be silent, because people are afraid to put themselves out there. They're afraid to bring new ideas to the table, or they may be afraid to challenge the norms that exist because they aren't sure how it's going to be received. They're not sure if they're confident enough in delivering that. And then when we don't have innovation, then we see people may not realize their potential. They may struggle to realize their potential. They may struggle to engage in different ways. They may not really want to be as participative as they would have if they did have that confidence. We start to see that then become a more common theme throughout the organization, rather than it being a one-off. Again, kind of goes back to what I talked about yesterday. If you have a leader that's not confident, if you have a leader that's displaying those behaviors, then their team is going to mirror those behaviors. And then when we start to see that mirrored kind of throughout the teams, then we start to see that there's really no progress, there's no innovation. And culturally, that starts to have a drag on the culture, because people feel like they're restrained. They feel like they can't be their total and full selves. They can't bring all the great ideas they may have to the table, because they may not feel that there's a place that's a safe space. Because if everyone is walking around on eggshells, if nobody's confident, it makes it hard for one person to stand out. And what ultimately happens is we start to lose people off of our teams, because people will only be able to survive in those type of settings and those type of cultures for so long before they recognize that they need more opportunities. So how can you as a leader start to shift that, right? So you want to build that belief positive leadership culture. And so there's a term called thought spotting. So really what this is it's a tangible exercise that leaders can walk people through, that similar to the exercise that we talked about. So what are some of the limiting beliefs that you have? And people on the teams, again, if this is led by the leader and the leader is modeling this behavior, the leader says, hey, here are some of the limiting beliefs that I have, or that I have had, and here's what I did to get past it, leading through vulnerability, leading through curiosity. Those are things that leaders can do. But again, tangibly sitting down and saying, so what are those beliefs that are holding us back? And you see an example on the screen. I noticed that people were thinking, we're not ready for this pivot. Instead of saying it, we have exactly what we need in order to move forward, in order to go. So just intentionally being mindful about that belief positive culture, building the buddies that you may have. That I'm a big believer in peer-to-peer accountability, peer-to-peer support. There's an acronym that I've used for years, a PAL, which is your personal accountability link. So it's somebody that you have a relationship with, that you can share the things you're struggling with, but they can encourage you. Vice versa, the things that you want to celebrate, that's who you celebrate with. And again, vice versa, that's what you do for each other. And then charting your wins, right? I'm also a big believer in celebrating wins along the way, especially when we're talking about large projects. I talk about this all the time when it comes to change and change leadership. But just overall, celebrating the wins that you have and tangibly celebrating them, having it, again, either a brag wall or a way that you're able to visually and visibly log wins and celebrations. That's something that's going to help to build the belief leadership culture, because all of those wins had to come from an idea. And every one of those ideas had to come to the table because someone had the courage to share that idea. So how can you do that? How can we start doing that in a simple way, right? So here's just a really simple 5-minute daily ritual that you can do, right? One thing you can do in the morning is just do a check-in with yourself. Say, okay, where am I? What's going on, right? Where are my beliefs right now? Do I have any self-limiting beliefs that are popping up that may come up today, or maybe something that I struggled with from yesterday? And then when you recognize that happens, just kind of jot it down and say, I'm going to be mindful of this today. Then midday, check in with yourself and say, okay, through the day, this was something that was on my mind at the start of the day. Through the day, was this something that popped up? Was this something that challenged me? Was this something that I struggled with? And if so, okay, again, now I'm aware of it. I have another 3 or 4 hours to make sure that this does not pop up again and doesn't derail me again. Or if you were able to overcome it, jot down what it was that helped you overcome it. Where were you in that moment that you mentally that you were able to overcome it? And then how did you feel on the back end? And then at the end of the day, take some time to reflect as well. Doesn't have to be a whole lot. You see here, 2 minutes. 2 minutes is plenty of time to just look at that one belief that you had. And did it derail you that day, or were you able to overcome it? Were you able to push through? And then did you get empowered as a result of that? And just tangibly taking those notes, right? The more that you do this leadership mindset ritual, you'll start to see a pattern of, I had a belief, I was able to dispel the belief, and here's where I ended up at the end of the day feeling more comfortable, more confident. Or here was a belief, and here is where maybe it was affirmed a little bit. So now, what can I learn from that, right? Because that's the thing. It's not just the belief itself. It's even if that belief has some truth to it, what can you learn from that belief? What can you learn from going through that experience? So that way it doesn't just become a cycle where that belief pops up again and you run from it. What can you learn from being challenged by some of those self-limiting beliefs, even if they have some validity to it? And making that a consistent ritual that you do on a daily basis until you find that you are more confident and that you're more willing to take chances than you're being held back by those beliefs. And how you can help kind of measure that, how you can see where you're starting to have impact, right? Are you more confident in how you're speaking out? Are you more confident in sharing your perspectives and opinions? Are you more confident in challenging things respectfully when you think there may be a new or different way? Are you making decisions quicker? Are you able to get more clarity in your decision-making process? Do you feel physically better? Do you not feel those physical manifestations of that stress that we talked about before? And then are you starting to see the impact on the organization? Are you starting to see the impact on your teams and the people that you work with? So here's again another challenge for you for the next week, right? So for the next week, I want you to go through that process of identifying those limiting self-beliefs. I want you to go through the process of documenting how you're feeling in those moments. By the end of the week, this week, or maybe early next week, right? What you want to do is you want to get that personal accountability link, or you want to get that partner, that peer that you are willing to share some of the things that you're struggling with. And you can say, hey, if you hear me in a meeting, say something and couch it with, I don't know how this is going to land, but, or I have, I'm not sure that you want to hear this, but like, if you start to hear some of those things, I want you to tell me that I'm doing that. I want you to, if it's not appropriate in the moment, to give me feedback. I want you to give me feedback immediately after the meeting, or immediately after that setting, or immediately after that experience. So that way it can be top of mind for me. So that way you're working on getting feedback that you can make actions on. Again, document all of these things. It's going to help you go a lot farther faster. And then by this time next week, next Tuesday or Wednesday, just put yourself out there. Just take one of those bold steps, whether it be to, raise your hand in a meeting that you haven't raised your hand in before, or comment on a project that you haven't commented on before. Really put yourself out there and challenge yourself to really dismantle those self-limiting beliefs that exist. All right, that's our time for today. Thank you so much again for your participation, your attendance on today's session of the masterclass. We've got one more tomorrow. I am looking forward to that as well. Until then, hope you have a great rest of your day. Again, challenge yourself. If you have any of those self-limiting beliefs that pop up today, be mindful of it, be aware of it, jot it down, develop a strategy around it, and let's tackle it the next time it comes up. All right, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all tomorrow.